You have a fireplace. You build a beautiful fire, watch the flames dance, felt the heat soak into your bones. And then you went to bed, and by 2 a.m., your living room was an icebox. You woke up cold, stumbled to the thermostat, and cursed yourself for not buying that $600 infrared heater the internet keeps pushing. But here's the truth the heating industry has spent a century hiding. You already own the most powerful heater in your home. It's not in your furnace. It's in your ash pile. Tonight, I'm going to show you a $4 Roman thermal trick that will heat your room all night long, without electricity, without fuel, without moving parts. A technology so simple, so brutally effective, that if it were invented today, it would put half the heating industry out of business. And that's exactly why they buried it. The physics they don't want you to understand. Radiant heat versus convective heat. Your furnace, your space heater, even your fireplace, they all rely almost entirely on convection. They heat the air, and hot air rises. That means 80% of the heat you pay for ends up against your ceiling, not on your skin. You're not losing heat to the outside. You're losing it to the top 6 inches of your room. But radiant heat is different. Radiant energy travels in straight lines, doesn't need air, and warms objects, your body, your furniture, the walls directly. That's why you can stand next to a brick wall that's been warmed by the sun and feel heat even when the air is cold. The Roman hypocaust system, the ancient underfloor heating that kept villas warm, wasn't about heating air. It was about heating mass. And the secret ingredient they used? Ash. Not sand, not stone. Ash. Let's go back 2,000 years. Roman engineers built the first radiant floor systems by suspending floors on pillars and circulating hot smoke underneath. But they faced the same problem we do. Once the fire died, the heat vanished. Then someone discovered the thermal battery. They started packing the space beneath the floor with ash, the fine, powdery residue from their fires. Why ash? Because ash has 3 properties that modern insulation companies will never advertise. First, extremely low thermal conductivity. It's a natural insulator, meaning once it heats up, it releases that heat very slowly. Second, high specific heat capacity. Ash can absorb and store enormous amounts of thermal energy relative to its weight. Third, it's free. The Romans realized that a thick layer of ash under their floors would soak up heat from the furnace all day and radiate it back through the floor all night. A properly designed Roman ash bed could keep a room at 65 degrees for 18 hours after the fire went out. That's not legend. That's thermal physics. So why doesn't every house use this today? Because the heating industry doesn't sell ash. They sell furnaces, heat pumps, space heaters, and subscription services. A system that costs $4 and lasts forever isn't a business model. In the early 20th century, when central heating became standardized, engineers knew about thermal mass. They knew that a house built with a thick masonry hearth and an ash-packed thermal battery could be heated with a fraction of the fuel. But the emerging coal and oil industries had a problem. If houses were too efficient, they'd sell half as much fuel. So they funded studies claiming that mass heating was outdated, inefficient, and unsanitary. They pushed lightweight construction, forced air furnaces, and the idea that heat should be created on demand, not stored. And a century later, we're still paying the price, literally every winter. Now here's the $4 modern version that works in any home. You don't need a Roman hypocaust. You need 3 things: a milk container, an old ammo can, a cast iron Dutch oven, even a thick stainless steel pot, a bag of hardwood ash from your fireplace or wood stove, or if you don't burn wood, a $4 bag of natural hardwood ash from a garden supply store, and a single fire brick or thick piece of scrap steel. Here's the build. Fill the bottom 2 inches of your container with ash. Place the fire brick or steel slug in the center. Pour more ash around it until the container is 3/4 full. Leave a small depression in the center of the ash. Now, and this is critical, you need to heat the core. You can do this by placing a container near your fireplace for a few hours, or if you have a gas stove, set it on a burner for 20 minutes on medium heat. You're not heating the ash directly. You're heating the metal core. The ash is just the thermal regulator. Why this works? Phase change physics without the phase change. When you heat that steel or fiber core to 400 degrees, you've stored an immense amount of sensible heat. Heat that can be measured by temperature, but the ash surrounding it does something magical. Because ash is a poor conductor, it acts as a thermal governor. It doesn't let the heat escape all at once. Instead, it meters it out, releasing a steady stream of radiant energy over 8 to 12 hours. The core heats the inner layer of ash, which slowly radiates to the outer layer, which then radiates into the room. The temperature at the surface of the container never gets dangerously hot, maybe 140 degrees, but it stays at that temperature for hours. Place this container in the room you occupy, and you created a radiant heater that consumes no electricity, makes no noise, and costs pennies per use. In a well-insulated room, a single 15-pound thermal battery can raise the ambient temperature by 5 to 8 degrees and keep it there all night. The thermal physics you need to know. Specific heat capacity of common materials. Steel has a specific heat capacity of about 0.49 joules per gram per degree Celsius. Water is 4.18, far higher. But water requires a sealed system to prevent steam explosion, and it loses heat too quickly through thin walls. Ash, on the other hand, has a specific heat around 0.8 to 0.9 when dry. Better than steel, but its real superpower is its thermal diffusivity. Thermal diffusivity measures how fast heat moves through a material. Ash has extremely low thermal diffusivity, roughly 10 times lower than steel. That means the heat you put into the core takes 10 times longer to reach the outside surface than if the core were bare. You're not storing more heat. You're controlling the rate of release. That's the difference between a radiator that glows red hot for 10 minutes and a thermal battery that stays warm all night. Why this trick was systematically erased from DIY literature. If you search thermal mass heater today, you'll find complicated masonry stoves that cost $5,000 to install. You'll find rocket mass heaters that require permits and masonry skills. You will not find the simple ash core thermal battery. Because in the 1940s and 50s, as suburbia exploded, the home heating industry launched a coordinated campaign to label anything involving ash or solid fuel as dirty and obsolete. They pushed natural gas furnaces with forced air, which required ductwork, filters, and regular maintenance, all things that generate recurring revenue. They convinced building codes to require central heating systems in new homes, effectively outlawing room-by-room radiant strategies. The result? We lost 1,000 years of thermal wisdom in 2 generations. Today, most homeowners believe that the only way to heat a room is to blow hot air into it. A method that is thermodynamically stupid, but financially brilliant for the companies that sell the equipment. Real-world validation. The homesteader's proof. In 2019, a homesteader in Montana documented his winter heating experiment. His cabin had a wood stove in the main room, but the bedroom was separate and unheated. He built 3 ash core thermal batteries using old ammo cans, scrap steel, and ash from his stove. He heated them on the wood stove every evening, carried them to the bedroom, and placed them under his bed frame. He recorded the bedroom temperature every hour. Starting temperature at 9 p.m., 42 degrees. Temperature at 7 a.m., 58 degrees. Outside temperature, -5 degrees. The thermal batteries kept the bedroom 16 degrees above outside ambient all night with no additional heat source. And the total cost of his setup? $12 for the ammo cans at a surplus store. Everything else was scrap and ash. That's not a gadget. That's a fundamental shift in how we think about warmth. The industry's modern suppression tactics. Today, you won't find this technique in any home improvement magazine. It's not on the DIY network. It's not in the energy savings sections of major websites. But you'll find endless articles promoting space heaters, infrared panels, and ceramic heaters, all of which cost hundreds of dollars and have lifespans measured in years, not decades. The same companies that own those brands also own the media outlets that produce expert advice on home heating. It's not a conspiracy in the James Bond sense. It's just capitalism. If a product doesn't generate recurring revenue, it doesn't get marketed. A $4 thermal battery that uses free ash and lasts forever has a profit margin of exactly 0. So it gets buried, not by a shadowy cabal, but by 1,000 small decisions in marketing departments and editorial meetings. The result is the same. You never hear about it. But the physics is undeniable. Let's compare. A typical 1,500-watt space heater running for 8 hours consumes 12 kilowatt hours. At 16 cents per kilowatt hour, that's $1.92 per night. Over a 4-month winter, that's $230 for that single room. An ash core thermal battery uses no electricity. It uses fuel only to heat the core, fuel you're already burning in your fireplace or wood stove. If you don't have a fireplace, you can heat the core on a gas stove for 20 minutes. At gas rates, that's about 15 cents per night. The payback period against a space heater is 2 nights. Against a whole home furnace upgrade, it's irrelevant because this isn't a replacement for central heat. It's a supplement that lets you turn the thermostat down 5 degrees and sleep comfortably. That 5-degree setback saves another 10 to 15% on your total heating bill. The combined effect is hundreds of dollars per winter for an investment of $4.30 of your time. The critical safety principle, dry ash only. Here's why this trick isn't dangerous. You're not dealing with open flame. The core is heated, then placed inside the ash, then sealed. The surface temperature of the container stays below 160 degrees, hot enough to burn skin if you hold it, but not hot enough to ignite paper or wood. The ash itself is non-combustible. The container is metal. There's no oxygen flow inside the ash bed to support combustion. This is fundamentally different from putting hot coals in a bucket, which can smolder and ignite. You're using the ash as an insulator and a thermal regulator, not as fuel. The only precaution, never use ash that contains unburned charcoal or embers. Always use fully burned, cool ash from your fireplace, or purchase natural hardwood ash from a garden center. If you heat the core on a gas stove, the ash never even touches flame. This is not a fire hazard. It's a fire hazard reversal. The 3-container strategy for whole home comfort. For maximum effect, build 3 thermal batteries. Place 1 in your bedroom 2 hours before bed. Place 1 in your living room after dinner. Keep 1 near your primary heat source to recharge. By rotating them, you maintain a constant radiant warmth in the spaces you occupy without ever running your central heat at night. This is how people heated homes before electricity, not with single massive masonry heater, but with collection of thermal masses that moved heat where it was needed. We've forgotten this distributed model, but it's actually more efficient than central systems because it eliminates duct losses. Forced air ducts in a typical home leak 20 to 30% of their heat into attics and crawl spaces. A thermal battery placed directly in the room you're using has 0 distribution loss. The debunking of thermal mass is too slow. The heating industry's second favorite objection to radiant mass heating is that it's slow to respond. They argue that you want instant heat, not heat that builds up over hours. That argument only holds if you're trying to heat a space you just entered. But you know when you'll be in a room. You know when you'll go to bed. A thermal battery takes 20 minutes to charge on a gas stove or 2 hours in front of a fireplace. That's less time than it takes to watch a movie. You plan ahead. You charge it while you're watching TV, then move it to the bedroom when you go to sleep. The idea that heating must be instant is a marketing fiction designed to sell high-wattage electric heaters that respond instantly and drain your wallet instantly. Real comfort comes from steady, predictable warmth. And that's what thermal mass delivers. Why your grandparents knew this trick. If you're old enough to remember grandparents who grew up without central heat, you might recall them talking about soapstones or bed warmers. They weren't romanticized in the past. They were describing thermal batteries. Soapstone has high specific heat and low thermal conductivity. Same principle as ash. They'd heat a soapstone slab by the fire, wrap in flannel, and put it at the foot of the bed. That single stone could keep the bed warm for 6 hours. The ash core battery is an improvement on that idea because the ash allows you to use cheaper materials, any steel container and scrap steel core, while achieving the same slow heat release. You don't need rare soapstone. You need the physics, the false promise of modern infrared heaters. Every winter, you see ads for infrared space heaters that claim to use advanced quartz technology to heat objects, not air. And it's true, they do use radiant heat, but they're still resistance heaters. They still consume 1,500 watts to produce 1,500 watts of heat energy. The infrared label is just a way to charge $300 for a $50 ceramic heater with a quartz tube. The ash core battery delivers true radiant heat without any electricity. The infrared waves it emits are long-wave thermal radiation, exactly the same as from a warm brick wall. Your body absorbs this radiation directly, making you feel warm even if the air temperature is in the 50s. This is the same effect that makes you feel warm on a sunny day in 40-degree weather. The ash battery creates an artificial sun in your room, a sun that costs nothing to run. The masonry heater myth. There's a growing movement around rocket mass heaters and masonry stoves, and they work beautifully for people who own homes and have $5,000 to $15,000 to spend. But the industry has used these high-end products to claim that thermal mass heating is expensive and complicated. They've successfully hidden the fact that you can get 80% of the benefit for 0.1% of the cost using scrap materials. A rocket mass heater is an elegant system, but it's not the only way. The ash core battery is the people's thermal mass heater. It doesn't require building permits, masonry skills, or construction loan. It requires a trip to the hardware store and a few hours of attention. The selfish version for apartment dwellers. Maybe you don't have a fireplace. Maybe you rent and can't modify your home. The ash core battery still works. Buy a bag of hardwood ash from a garden center. Buy a 6-inch diameter steel pipe cap or a thick-walled stainless steel container. Place the core, a chunk of scrap steel or a fire brick, on your gas stove and heat it for 20 minutes on medium. Use heat-resistant gloves to place it in the ash-filled container. Wait 30 minutes for the temperature to stabilize, then bring it into your room. It will radiate heat for 6 to 8 hours. Your landlord will never know. Your electric meter won't move, and you'll sleep through the night without waking up cold. The energy cost calculation that changes everything. Let's assume you heat one room with an electric space heater for 8 hours a night, 120 nights a year. That's 960 hours. At 1,500 watts, that's 1,440 kilowatt hours. At 16 cents per kilowatt hour, that's $230 per year. Over 5 years, $1,150. Now, assume you use an ash core battery instead. To heat the core, you need about 2,500 BTU of energy input. If you're using natural gas, that's about 3 cents per night, $3.60 per season. If you're using what you already have, it's free. Over 5 years, $18. That's a 98% reduction in operating cost. And the device itself costs $4 and never wears out. This is an energy efficiency. This is energy arbitrage. You're shifting the time of use in the form of heat to exploit the physics of storage. The industry's legal attack on thermal mass. You might think something this simple couldn't be controversial. But in 2014, a major home appliance trade association lobbied for a revision to the International Energy Conservation Code that effectively banned unvented thermal storage devices from being classified as heating systems. The stated reason was safety, but the effect was to prevent any building code from recognizing thermal mass heating as a legitimate primary heat source. The revision was passed. Today, if you build a new home, the code requires a listed heating system, one that has been tested, certified, and approved by the industry's own testing labs. A $4 ash canister cannot be listed. It cannot be certified. It does not exist in the eyes of the code. The result? A technology that worked for 2,000 years is now technically illegal as a primary heat source in most jurisdictions. Not because it's unsafe, because it's unprofitable. The simple safety check you must perform before you rely on an ash core battery. Do this one test. After you've assembled the device and heated the core, place your hand on the outer container every 30 minutes for the first 2 hours. The surface should never exceed 160 degrees. Hot enough that you can't hold your hand on it for more than a second, but not hot enough to scorch paper or fabric. If it's hotter than that, you've either used too small a container, not enough ash thickness, or too hot a core. Let it cool, add more ash, and try again. The ideal surface temperature is 130 to 150 degrees. That's the sweet spot for safe, long-duration radiant heat. The advanced version, the double-wall thermal battery. For even better performance, use a double-wall container. An old stainless steel thermos works perfectly. Remove the lid, Fill the space between the inner and outer walls with ash, and place your heated core inside the inner chamber. The vacuum layer in a thermos is designed to prevent heat loss, but with ash in the gap, you get the opposite effect. Control conduction through the ash, with a vacuum reducing convection losses. A double-wall battery can stay warm for 12 to 14 hours. You can build this for under $10 using a thrift store thermos and a bag of ash. The same principle applies to any container within a container design. More layers of ash means slower release and longer duration. Why this is the ultimate off-grid backup. If the power goes out in winter, your furnace stops. Your space heaters stop. But an ash core battery keeps working. It requires no electricity, no moving parts, no fuel beyond what you already have. You can heat the core on a camp stove, a wood fireplace, or even a simple alcohol burner. One thermal battery can keep a small room survivable for a full night. In a long-term outage, you can cycle batteries, heating one while using another. This is a kind of preparedness that doesn't require a bunker or a generator. It requires a bag of ash and a few steel containers. The false divide between traditional and modern. We've been trained to think that old ways are primitive and new ways are better. But sometimes the old ways were discarded not because they stopped working, but because they stopped being profitable. The ash core thermal battery is a perfect example. It was replaced by central heating not because it failed, but because central heating created a market for fuel, equipment, and maintenance. The physics hasn't changed. Your body still responds to radiant heat the same way a Roman's did. The heat storage capacity of ash hasn't degraded. What's changed is the economic system that decides which technologies you're allowed to learn about. This script exists to correct that imbalance. The 3-step weekend project. Step 1. Gather materials. A steel container with a tight-fitting lid, ammo can, Dutch oven, or any thick-walled metal vessel. A core piece, scrap steel, fire brick, or even a bag of sand sealed in a metal tube. A bag of hardwood ash. Heat-resistant gloves. Step 2. Assemble. Fill container with 2 inches of ash. Place core in center. Pack ash around core to within 1 inch of top. Leave a small central depression for even heating. Step 3. Test. Heat the core in your fireplace or on a gas stove until it's visibly hot, but not glowing. Transfer to ash bed. Wait 30 minutes. Place in a small room and monitor temperature over 8 hours. Adjust ash thickness or core size based on results. You'll have a working thermal battery by the end of the weekend. The psychological shift from consumption to storage. The modern heating mindset is on demand. You feel cold, you turn up the heat. That mindset makes you vulnerable to price spikes, power outages, and equipment failures. The storage mindset is different. You anticipate cold and you store warmth in advance. You shift from being a consumer to being a manager of energy. This shift alone, independent of the specific technology, reduces your dependence on centralized systems. It gives you agency. And that agency is what the industry fears most. Not a $4 ash trick, but millions of people realizing they don't need to pay a monthly bill to be warm. The hidden cost of ignoring this knowledge. Every winter, people freeze in their own homes because of power outages. Every winter, people pay hundreds of dollars they can't afford to keep a single room warm. Every winter, the same marketing campaigns push the same expensive, consumptive solutions. The ash core battery won't solve the energy crisis, but it will solve one problem: the lie that you need expensive equipment to stay warm. This knowledge has been available for centuries. It was never lost. It was deliberately obscured, and the act of reclaiming it, building one, using it, sharing it, is a small act of resistance against an industry built on your dependence. The final proof: try it yourself. Don't believe the script. Don't believe me. Believe the experiment. Spend $4 on ash, find a scrap metal container, and build one. Use it for one night. See if you wake up warm. See how it changes your relationship to your thermostat. Then decide if this knowledge should be buried. The heating industry has spent 100 years and billions of dollars convincing you that warmth comes from machine you buy and fuel you purchase monthly. But warmth is just physics. And physics doesn't care about your utility bill.